Yeah, good morning, everyone. It's another day at the World Water Forum in Dakar, and I still remain Temple Oraeki, the SWA Youth representative at the World Water Forum. And this morning, I'm here with a passionate WASH advocate who would be sharing with us his experience so far at the World Water Forum. So, can we get to know you?
Sure. Thank you, Temple. My name is John Oldfield, and it's a pleasure to be here with you, and thank you for the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you. Until recently, I was managing principal with a nonprofit advocacy group in Washington, D.C. called Global Water 2020, and now I'm continuing to consult in the global WASH advocacy space.
All right, that's awesome. Good to meet you. So, briefly, can we get to know what has been your experience so far at the World Water Forum?
Sure. Thank you, Temple. So far, as always, at the World Water Forum, and this is my second World Water Forum, I'm learning, I'm listening in French, in English, trying to learn from the Wolof speakers, to learn as much about progress that's being made in the global safe drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene space. There is a lot of discussion here about the problems, about better ways to quantify risks associated with a lack of safe drinking water, with a lack of sanitation, with a lack of ability to wash one's hands during COVID. And I understand that. I am more interested, and I'm hearing a lot about the solutions to those problems here. So I find this World Water Forum more focused on action, not on solutions, not just on telling each other how serious the problem is without making any recommendations or talking about actions. So I find the conversations here a little more tangible, a little more practical, a little less philosophical. And for that, I'm grateful. I think we're all out here looking for new ideas, looking for ways to accelerate progress. We all know, once again, the gap between where we are now and where we need to get to by 2030. 100% means 100%. 2030, the SDGs mean that everybody on the planet should have access to safe drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene. Every family, every community, every school, every healthcare facility, every prison, every marketplace, every transportation hub. So I'm here looking for specific, tangible ideas about how to accelerate progress for WASH across all of these settings. And I think a lot of other people are too. One example would be the questions after every session that I've attended here. The questions are rarely about, well, tell me a little bit more, please, about that report's findings. The questions are all about, okay, so what? Thank you for that report, which better quantifies the problems we're facing. But the questions are about, what do we do with it? What is your plan to disseminate this report and get it in front of the right stakeholders, the right decision makers in the public and in the private sectors? So I like the vibe here. I like the approach that people are taking to actually accelerating progress on solutions rather than just shaking their heads about how serious the problem is.
Awesome. Good to know that. Coming to the forum, were there any expectations you had coming to the forum, and do you think those expectations have been met so far?
Well, Temple, my expectations were that it would be more of the same. People talking about problems rather than solutions. So my expectations have been very pleasantly surpassed. The conversations here have been about solutions, not just about problems. So I'm a couple of examples. Financing. I've been a part of a lot of very serious conversations here about financing. And these conversations, these stakeholders are open to conversations about all different types of financing, public and private and hybrid and innovative financing. And I think those conversations will lead to the investments, to the transactions that the sector needs in order to meet the SDGs. So one specific type of financing, let's say, is domestic resources in developing countries themselves. The international donor community cannot and will not and should not solve these problems. Water, sanitation, and hygiene problems need to be solved by countries for their own countries, by political leaders for their own citizens. Overseas official development assistance can help. There's no question about that. And I'm very proud that my government, the U.S. Agency for International Development in particular, has a significant presence here, as do a number of other donor countries, including the government of Switzerland. But those governments' efforts, no matter how extensive they are, including a $1.2 billion commitment from USAID, those governments' efforts are a drop in the bucket. They can be an important drop in the bucket if those monies are spent not on drilling wells and building facilities, but on strengthening the enabling environment. So I think USAID and the Swiss Development Cooperation Agency are two examples of bilateral donors who are doing it well, if not perfectly. But the biggest source of financial support, the biggest source of investment for SDG 6 is and must be domestic resources in developing countries. Taxpayer resources in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Guatemala, in Vietnam, in India. The overseas community can only solve one very small piece of this problem. So the conversations I'm hearing out here in Senegal about financing are not just about, well, how can we find another 100,000 euros for a few more wells? The conversations I'm hearing out here about financing are much more advanced. They are about how do we get more public financial support to WASH in our own countries, and the Parliamentarians' Handbook on the human right to water and sanitation, I think, is going to be a key piece of that discussion and lead to significantly higher and more qualitative investments, more pro-poor investments in these countries in the very short term.
Yeah, totally agree with you on that. Then let's come to the aspect that seems to be eluding global leaders in the water sector, and that's youth participation or involvement in these key decision-making processes. At this forum, do you think the youths are being involved in decision-making so far?
Well, I've spent quite a bit of time at the youth stand, the youth pavilion here, and I've learned a couple of things. There's better music there. It's more fun there. It's outside. There's less risk of COVID transmission. So it's great to see a significant presence of youth here, much more than in the past, much more than at other World Water Forums, much more than at World Water Week, and specifically youth from developing countries, Africa in particular. So it's both a concern and a bit of advice to the youth. I hear from the youth that we are the future. And that really doesn't interest me. The youth are the present. The youth need to push even harder, not in 5 years from now, not in 2 years from now, but today, this morning, this afternoon. The world cannot afford to wait for the youth to be more confident. The youth should not wait for the world to be more accepting. And if a youth is somebody from 18 to 35 years old, there's a lot of passion, a lot of capacity, a lot of potential. And you know what? The timing is absolutely right now. So what does that mean? Specific suggestions would be for the youth to continue to raise their voices through individual and collective advocacy. Speak to their governments at national and local levels, at provincial levels, at county levels, at province levels. Make sure that their voices are heard. And make sure that their voices represent not just the youth, but the most marginalized communities within their countries, the most vulnerable communities, the most rural communities within their countries. Youth have a strong role to play in the WASH in Schools objectives, of course. Many of these youth are still in school, and all of these youth, for their own purposes and their families' purposes, need access to safe drinking water, gender disaggregated sanitation facilities, hand washing stations, menstrual hygiene products. Raise your voices and look for ways to professionalize your advocacy towards your own governments, whether it's in Senegal or Sierra Leone or Guatemala or Cambodia. Spend as much time as you can. Look to make advocacy a profession, not just a hobby. The youth are very, very good at advocacy as a hobby. And they come out here and they do advocacy for a week, and then they go back home, back to school, or back to their technical jobs. And then advocacy becomes just a hobby again for 2 hours a week, 4 hours a month. What I'm interested in is, and maybe this is a call to action, Temple, would be let's get the international donor community to support professional WASH youth advocacy networks in every developing country. Why not? Provide the technical and financial capital to professionalize youth WASH advocacy, and the governments have to listen to their own people. I think that has the potential. Professional youth WASH advocacy has the potential to significantly move the needle toward SDG 6.
Oh, this has been quite an interesting and insightful session with you, John. And I know you still have a lot to say, but at this point, let's draw the curtain and say thank you very much. And it was nice having you.
Hey, thank you, Temple. It's an honor and a pleasure. I appreciate it.